Okay. So it looks like everybody from the waiting room has filtered in. So hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. Today, we're going to be discussing navigating the intersection of law and policy, a guide to government law careers. So I'm going to do just briefly mention who's here on the call with us, go through the MSL programs real quick, and then I'll do a more thorough introduction and hand over the webinar to our guest speakers. That's just our agenda, which I just covered. Okay, so really quickly, my name is Katiana. I'm the Assistant Director of the Online Master's Programs here at McGeorge. And with me today is Professor O'Neill. Gosh, I can't talk today. And then some of our alumni from the MSL program, including Sarah Kerber, Erin Norwood, and Jamie Taylor. So very briefly, we have several different options for the Masters of Science and Law programs at McGeorge. We have a Master of Science in Law with no concentration. This is an opportunity for students to kind of customize what they're studying a little bit. So you can kind of choose from classes that we offer on campus and online. Then we have two concentrations that are hybrid, which is our human resources and our health law. So those students take classes both online and in person, just as part of their curriculum. And then we have our three fully online concentrations in government law and policy, water and environmental law, and business law. And just so you all know, even if you're in a fully online concentration, you also have the opportunity to take classes on campus, attend events, and be a part of our campus if you are local. Okay, so guest speakers. So as I mentioned, today with us is Professor O'Neill, who is not just one of our professors at McGeorge, but she's also the director in government law for the Government Law and Policy concentration and the director of the Capital Center for Law and Policy. And then our three alumni that are with us are Jamie Taylor, who's the director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the California State Senate, Erin Norwood, who is a partner at Norwood Associates, and Sarah Kerber, who's the Assistant Secretary for Business Transformation and Strategic Development at the California Government Operations Agency. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Professor O'Neill.
Hi, everyone. I'm Professor Erin O'Neill. I'm so glad you were able to join us today, and I hope you will learn something about our MSL program in government law and policy, and most particularly from our alumni who are with us, how the degree is valuable in the employment and career space once you graduate. As Kat mentioned, I am the director of the Capital Center for Law and Policy here at McGeorge. I also teach in our capital lawyering concentration, our JD program, our law school program here at McGeorge, and also in our MSL in government law and policy program, I teach a leadership course. And I'm excited to talk with you today about kind of my background experience and why I think that this program makes sense if you're interested in working in government law and policy, and what I think that it can add to your skill set in terms of getting a job afterwards. By way of background, I worked in the California State Legislature before I went to law school. I worked for Bill Lockyer, who was then chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee and subsequently President Pro Tem of the Senate. And then he went on to be State Attorney General and State Treasurer. And while I was there, I decided that I thought that my experience in the capital and the policy space would be enriched by having a law degree. At that time, not a lot of law schools were offering an MSL in law and policy, and that was kind of the route to get legal education and then bring that back to the policy space. So I ultimately elected to go to law school, and I was a litigator for many years after that. And then I came back to McGeorge to combine kind of my advocacy skills in the litigation space and also in policy and government. Our programs at McGeorge, our government law and policy programs, are ranked #1 in the country for government law. So if you are interested in working in this space, I don't think there's a better place that you could be. We are obviously the Capitol's law school, located very close to our state capitol. And one of the things I'm excited for you to learn about today is our alumni work in various areas that are both in the building and also what I think of as building adjacent. So Jamie Taylor works in the building, and he will tell us about his role. Erin Norwood is a lobbyist, and so she interfaces directly with folks in the building. And then Sarah is working in a state agency. So there are many things that you can do within the government law and policy sphere using this degree, and having that legal experience and understanding something about how laws are written, legal writing and analysis principles, contract drafting principles. We offer courses in the lawmaking process, the executive branch, legislative processes. So there's a lot concrete practical skills that are conveyed through this program as well. So I think from my perspective, I would like to turn it over to our alumni, and they can tell you a little bit about why they chose McGeorge and this program and how they see it as being beneficial in the careers that they've ultimately decided to pursue following their graduation. So first on my screen is Sarah. Sarah, do you want to kind of kick things off?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Hi, Sarah Kerber. My title is really long right now. The Assistant Secretary for Business Transformation and Strategic Development. I am appointed by Governor Brown in this role at Government Operations Agency. But I graduated class of 2018 from the MSL program with a focus on government, regs and labor relations. Those are kind of the areas that I was interested in. And the reason I decided to do the program at McGeorge, I was working in a labor union as a governmental relations assistant, and I was trying to get to that next step in my career and was kind of struggling to set myself apart and get those promotional opportunities. And I was at an event and someone mentioned the McGeorge program. Um, and it sounded like exactly what I needed, just enough legal training to be really annoying to local elected officials, just enough to help me get my foot in the door in my career and continue to grow. And um, after completing the program, I was able to transition into a role at the state working for the Department of Finance. I took a couple of classes in data analytics from the MPP and PA program while I was at McGeorge. And those skills really helped me do that detailed data analysis at finance. The policy analysis skills that I learned were instantly applicable in my new role. And I've found that being able to read contracts, negotiate, and understand policy at a high level has really helped me throughout my career. So I moved on from finance. I worked at another agency, the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. I transitioned from that role into public transit. And now I'm at GovOps, where I work on creating regulations around generative AI and updating our state's procurement policies. So really varied experience just from the skills that I was able to get at McGeorge. I feel like they gave me a strong grounding that helped me navigate the kind of different roles, different industries throughout my career for the past, oh gosh, how many years has it been? Several years since I graduated. So that's a little bit about me. I can hand it over to Jamie.
I'll pick it from there. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciated that as well. I finished my MSL degree in 2017, so just a year before you. We didn't cross paths, but too much if I don't recall. But it was a great experience. It got me out of my comfort zone. And sort of, if any of you out there are sort of in a space where you feel like you're not fully tapped, fully being utilized for what you bring to the table. That's what I was going through working in a nonpartisan space in the legislature, an administrative space. So for many years, I worked at the Senate desk and produced the Senate Daily File, which was a great experience. Working there, I learned about process and procedure. You process, validate, record, and are able to publish information, letting the general public know what is happening before the legislature, which was a great place for me to be when my kids were younger, and while I also wanted to learn the process as an expert. But there came a point in my career where I felt like I was doing the same thing each and every day, and which is important in the legislature. You do need a certain amount of transparency and consistency. But I realized I was not for long in that space. I was more of a creative type that wanted to make changes to the system to make the system better, or more importantly, I realized over a period of time that the work I wanted to do was people-centered, and that I wanted to teach people the process. But along that, it was very difficult to transition, and so I had heard about the MSL program, and it was really interesting because it was all of the things that I wanted. I did not want to practice, but I wanted to learn legal analysis. I wanted to improve my writing skills and communication skills, and learn how to negotiate, and learn things actually in my sphere that I had blind spots. Working in a space in the legislature that was nonpartisan, I realized at a point I did not know what the third house was like. I didn't really work in a member office, but I worked in the legislature. And going into MSL courses, I was able to work with professors that were also in the field, right? They were working in the third house, or they very much were experts in a specific field that was of interest on the policy side. And so it was really cool. I really learned from the experts in that space, or in the third house, and I was able to really kind of take my understanding of the legislature and round it out. And what inevitably happened after I finished the fellowship, the MSL program, the Capitol Senate Fellows Program position vacated, and there was a vacancy there, and I was able to apply to that position and really take the skills that I had developed over my career, but also now with this legal understanding and quite frankly, confidence that was developed out of my MSL experience, and take it to the next level, which was then to train students how the process worked. And I did that, and I was able to do that, quite frankly, because of all of my experience combined with my MSL credentials. It helped me apply to an academic environment. It really took away the no's throughout my next step, took away the no's, and I'm really I'm where I am because of the MSL program, to be frank. It's above and beyond all of that. I'll tell you, when I told myself, when I get into the MSL program, I'll be very happy. When I got into the program, I was like, this is really intense and hard, but I know it's worth it. And when I finished it, I thought, oh, I miss it. So it's a journey, and it's about the journey. It's about the process of learning and growing and expanding and getting and adding, basically sharpening your axe along the way and adding to your credentials and skill sets. That when you finish the program, you go, wow, I did that, and and you're better for it.
Okay, I think
And I'll pass it along.
And could I ask for one clarification, just because I recall before I started working in the legislature, I didn't know what this term meant, and maybe everyone here knows, but you made several references to the third house.
Oh,
why is it
yeah.
called the third house, and what is that?
Thank you. Sorry. And this is something you'll learn. And if you take a class, probably, I don't know what it will be called today, but, is non-traditional lawyering or capital lawyering. And that was a class I took with Chris McKelly, where we learned a ton about the third house, which are lobbyists. So you'll have outside organizations that have interests before the legislature. And I know Erin will talk a lot more about that. As she is an expert in that space as well.
Thanks, Jamie. Yes, I am part of the third house. So I'm a contract lobbyist and a boutique, a small lobbying firm. And we represent a variety of different interests and industries, from insurance to pharmaceuticals to business, financial, higher education. And so that's one of the fun parts of being a contract lobbyist, is you get to, dip your toes into a lot of different subject areas. And I think that, part of why I was always looking at law school was because some of my clients were so, just in such complex areas, such as insurance, where, we had a lot of bills and initiatives in front of the Judiciary Committee, and, very technical legal terms that I often felt kind of at a disadvantage of. And I've been doing this a long time. So when I first started out, there were a lot more attorneys that were serving in the legislature. That's not so much the case anymore, but at that time there were several. And, when you went into those offices, you always felt a little uneasy. Like, is this going to be over my head? Are they going to use terms that I'm not familiar with? And so I had always kind of toyed with the idea of going to law school. I had taken the LSAT. I was kind of looking for the right opportunity to do it. And I was always saying, like, gosh, if they just had the parts of law school, the classes that I would take that are relevant to what I do, that would be great. I've had, like Jamie, I had no intention of ever practicing. So I was like, why would I need to take Civ Pro and all of these other classes that weren't just really relevant to my day-to-day activities? And so when this program it was advertised in the Capital Morning Report. I was part of the first class, so we were like the guinea pigs of the MSL. So this was, I think, back in 2013. Um, I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what will allow me to take, constitutional law and you know, I don't know what it is now, statutory and legal interpretation and, capital lawyering and election law and, a lot of the things that I was dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And I didn't have to take the LSAT again, which was a major bonus for me. I did not like that test. And then I didn't have to take the bar. And, it fit in my schedule. It seemed for me, I was like, oh, a year and a half to 2 years, that's doable. I can do that and not do a full 4 years and have to take time off to study for the bar and so forth. So this program to me was just like, what I was always asking for. So I had to do it. And I'm so glad that I did. And, it was certainly, an experience kind of being the first class. I think everyone were working through, what we needed to do to get us in the door and prepared because coming into this is completely different from your regular undergrad school. I mean, going into law school, the classes, the expectations, the how to write the briefs and all of that was not something that I was familiar with at all. So, but they did a great job of, helping us feel comfortable with that, preparing us. We did, all in class. I didn't have really any online, and it was a scary experience, but I loved it. Like Jamie, it is intense, it's challenging, and it did push me to my limits, but I'm so glad that I did it. And at the end of it, I was so proud of myself. And even immediately, like in the classes and the coursework, all of a sudden I'd be watching the judiciary hearing and I'd hear the terminology and I was like, oh, I know what that is now. It was definitely empowering. And like Jamie said, for me, the biggest thing was just the confidence that it gave me. I felt like, walking into a legislative meeting with an attorney, I felt like, okay, I can go head to head with this person. I, know what I'm talking about. I had a better understanding and a better comfortability with the complex statutes and things that we were advocating for or working on for our clients. I think, it helped me become a better drafter of statutory language because I know, what the courts would potentially be looking at. Constitutional law helps me with constitutional arguments. Not that the legislature cares too much about that, but it did help me understand, a lot more in depth about what I was doing and how I could be better for it. So I would say that the return on investment was happening immediately just in the first semester of classes, and it's just paid off in dividends moving forward. So I'll stop there.
Thank you all for sharing that. That's really helpful to kind of get a sense of why you decided to go to McGeorge for the MSL program and how you see it playing out. I think looking at this as either a current student or prospective student, it would be helpful to understand a little bit about what you all do on, a little bit of a snapshot of what you do on a daily basis in terms of different careers that are available. And then we can open the floor to questions from folks who are here in case they have any questions about your experience or the program itself. So let's see. Jamie, you want to start this time?
My apologies. Can you went in and out in there? Could you say
Oh, okay.
anything?
Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
No,
Um,
I
Just a
couldn't hear.
snapshot of what you do in your role, why your roles are different. One of the things that I think is fantastic about this panel is that we have such great representation of different possibilities with the degree. You know, state agency in the Capitol building and lobbyist or third house. So talking a little bit about what those jobs look like, I think might be interesting, and then we'll open the floor for questions.
Okay, so your question is about the kind of work that you might do in the legislature where, yeah, the having the MSL skill, I think it comes down mostly to writing, strong writing. No piece of legislation is formed without excellent writing all along the way, and that starts with emails between staff and advocates and or working with people in the building. And when we say the building, that is the building behind me under the dome, the legislature. So you'll hear those kinds of terms in our space. And it really, really begins with having a strong skill set, understanding the importance of what your audience is looking for, how to write a durable statement, how to draft a durable law that will eventually one day down the road withstand the test of judicial, any type of judicial review. And I think that's sort of the most important aspect. But it does give you the getting the MSL and working through your law school classes will teach you the important. I mean, I guess let me go back. The one thing you'll learn when you talk to an attorney or someone with a legal reference point or a legal understanding. If you ask them a question, most of the time you'll hear, well, it depends. And so that's the fun part where you begin to think on a much broader scale about how to protect your client. And your client is the member that you work for or the office that you work for, and the individual that you work for in these kinds of spaces. And so you will really write in ways that are clear and concise wherever you work. And so that could be legislative council, that could be, the desk, what we call the legislative desk, which is an administrative office of the legislature, assembly, senate desk. You could work in a member office, you can work for a committee, and all along the way, you're writing in such a manner that it is precise, it is consistent, it is clear, and it is durable. And so that's the big thing. And I think, again, it gives you the confidence in these spaces to have that type of credential to really focus on the long-term goal, which is to protect the people that you serve and to write in such a precise manner that you'll be able to do that. And so I think it's key in any space, and it'll be an advantage to you because I want to say that writing has eroded in the legislature as it has everywhere else. I think AI is an interesting tool, and I can see where having the understanding of how to do strong research, understanding code section, understanding the rule of law, being able to interpret that, being able to argue in many different ways, understanding the rule of law around that and the standard of how you might come to a decision, super, super important. And again, it will give you the ability to problem solve in any one of the jobs that are available in the legislature. Again, starting positions in the legislature are legislative aides, but you'll be doing a lot of writing. You'll be working a lot with sponsors of bills. Most bills are sponsored and don't come directly from an author's vision. And it's something that might be shared with a member of the legislature to say, we want you to take this measure and move it forward through the legislative process. And so you'll be working with experts, maybe folks like Erin in as we call the third house. She may be drafting legislation. You may be working with sponsors of the bill that might come from government agencies or nonprofits or other organizations. And so oftentimes those will be the experts. But as a staffer in the legislature, you have to refine your skills as well. And that will come with research, writing, discussions, negotiations, as you skill stack along the way in your career, and having a strong base of an MSL type credential, it'll give you the strength, it'll give you the skill set to kind of match that expertise that is from the outside in. And so real change, I believe, happens on the inside of institutions like this. Pressure comes from the outside, but real systemic change happens in spaces like this. And you need experts in this space. And so you become much more of a greater expert if you're able to communicate effectively and write effectively. And those are the types of tools mostly that I think you'll get in an MSL program that'll give you an advantage and make you stronger at what you do here.
Thank you, Jamie. Erin, can you tell us, what does it mean to be a lobbyist, and what do you do kind of on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I always say that lobbying is like half education and half sales. We are retained by various clients to advocate for their interests before the state legislature. So, all 120 members of the legislature, but also their staff who you interact very frequently with. And I feel like we pride ourselves on becoming experts. We definitely do have experts that we'll bring with us on meetings to get into kind of the technical weeds. But I think the first step for us when we bring on a new client is becoming an expert in whatever that industry is or the issue that we know we're going to be facing before the legislature. And so, really, there are 2,500 bills or so introduced each legislative session. So we will go through all of the bills, identify those that are of interest to our clients. We'll work with our clients to develop positions on them. 90% of what we do is play defense against bills that may adversely affect our clients. And then, we have to develop materials, position papers, background information, talking points to go and meet with the members of the staff and to, educate them and tell them why, they should be on our side, essentially. Every once in a while, we do have a sponsored bill and take a proactive approach. And that's a little bit bigger lift because, as Jamie was saying, you have to, basically convince a legislator to take that on as their own. You have to prepare them. You have to give them all of the background materials and floor speeches and fact sheets and everything that they need. You have to be responsible for doing, and you do become the resident expert in that policy area, and then you have to shepherd it through the whole process. So day to day, it's a lot of meetings, a lot of walking the halls of the Capitol, stopping by, talking to staff when you can, sometimes working the gate and pulling members off the floor when we're at a time like now where it's kind of the House of Origin. So bills that are introduced in the first house are switching to the second house. So, it's a lot of client engagement. You're constantly updating your clients on what's going on because oftentimes they're not here in Sacramento. So you need to let them know kind of the status of where things are in the process, how things are going, what's your vote count as you're coming up to a key committee hearing. You're also doing a lot of coalition building. There's a lot of trade associations, so you do a lot of calls with other members of the team that are advocating for the same thing. The advocacy, the fundraisers, I think is kind of the day-to-day life. I would say the one thing that keeps me, going is just every day is different. And every year you have different issues. And I think that's what keeps it really interesting. It's like one year you become an expert on workers' compensation and cumulative trauma. And the next year, talking about flavoring of children's medication, and the next it's so it's all you're always learning and challenging yourself, and I think that's one of the things that I enjoy the most about my job. And I always struggle with that question of like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? My kids ask me that some days, and I'm like, well, I don't know. We did a lot of calls. I walked 5 miles in the swing space and covered a lot of ground, and so yeah, it's a lot of different days, but it is a lot of fun, and I truly enjoy what I do.
Thank you, Erin. Yes, that was my favorite thing about being in the legislature, was learning about new things all the time and meeting
Always.
new people and all of that. Sarah, you have, like you said, you've moved to different agencies, you've escalated, increased your title, gotten promotions. Tell us a little bit about your trajectory through state government and what that's been like and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so the work that I've done at the state is kind of, once all those bills are passed, how do we implement and how do we execute on the new laws, the new rules that the legislature has put into place? Um, so in my current role, I think one of the things that is really critical that was a skill that I developed at McGeorge was the ability to do really quick analysis and make recommendations. And we're analyzing all sorts of different documents. So we're taking a look at statute, we're reviewing contracts, we're looking for risk, we're reviewing trailer bill language and budget bill language. We're reviewing internal policies, external policies, communications that are going out to stakeholders. So there's a lot of information coming in that needs to be synthesized and then make sure that it's on message for what the administration is trying to accomplish, on message for what our agency secretary is trying to accomplish, and that we're moving all of our programs forward in a way that's going to best serve the citizens of California. So day to day, luckily in this role, it's very different. We're also dealing with a lot of different issues. I work at an agency which oversees 13 different departments, and our departments are some of the most integrated with the all state employees. So we have CalHR, who does human resources for the state. We have CDT, the Department of Technology, who helps coordinate technology for the state. We have DGS, the Department of General Services, who does procurement and purchasing for the state and also does a lot of our real estate. We also have CalPERS and CalSTRS, who do our retirement programs. So a lot of our agencies are really broad, or departments are really broad reaching. So we have a lot of different issues that come up. And it's really interesting, the skills that you learn at McGeorge, the ability to look at a variety of information and quickly come up with recommendations or solutions, and be able to present it, like Jamie was saying, in a well thought out, well written way, has helped me throughout my career. Something else that I really appreciated from being a McGeorge grad is the community and the network that you have. Like there's in my office, we only have about 25 people, and another one of the assistant secretaries is also an MSL graduate, Sally Lee. So it really is a great community. I'll go to events, I'll go to meetings, and I'll be like, oh, McGeorge. So that's also a really nice part of going through this program and just having those built-in connections everywhere you go.
Thank you for raising that, Sarah. And I think that's a really good point. The Capital Center here at McGeorge, we have our MSL and government law and policy. As I mentioned, we have our capital lawyering concentration in the JD or law school program. And we also have, as been alluded to today, a master's of public policy and public administration. So 3 different programs focused on government law and policy, and just a tremendous alumni network that students from all of our programs are able to plug into, both while in school, getting to know alumni like we're doing right now. And then once you graduate, as Sarah said, you'll find yourself working with people who also went to McGeorge, and that's a sense of community right there. So I want to go ahead and open the floor to any questions that people have for our panelists about the program, anything that we can answer.
Yeah, if you guys just want to pop your questions in the little Q&A. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to give you a couple quick reminders. As was mentioned a couple times, you don't have to take the GRE or the LSAT for the MSL program. There's no entrance exam. It's just an application. It's pretty straightforward. Our priority deadline is June 1st. All that means is you get a decision in 2 weeks or less. After June 1st, we do still admit, it's just on a rolling basis and it takes a little bit longer. And then classes begin August 18th. If you have questions, there's my contact information, but most of you have gotten several emails from me, so just feel free to reach out. And so if there's any questions, just pop them in the chat.
Aaron, Tatiana, can I add a kind of an addendum to my initial statement on kind of the spirit of what goes on in the legislature? Something.
Of course, but Jamie, only if you frame it as an addendum, right?
Right. Yes, an amendment.
Yes, of course. Add anything. Yes, we would love that.
I'm going to throw a really an important quote for me anyway into the chat as well for folks to look at. And this is a quote that was shared with me by Assemblymember Cooley, who is no longer in the legislature, but is on the Capitol Center board and does a lot of work in the community as well. And I think this is helpful to understand kind of the mindset of how to make change and how you approach fixing problems in the legislature. And a lot of it is being persuasive, how you do so. But I think this is helpful. There could be no progress until enough people can be made dissatisfied. And this could be done only when they were brought to think beyond the limits to which they were accustomed by Thomas Edison. And this sort of in the practice of developing public policy, it's important to lead with deficiency, then positive design or aspirational goals, and then the kind of nuts and bolts, practical matters, and bolts practical matters that make the whole seem very doable. And so in the legislature, staff are really sort of putting together arguments for their member through research and basically putting together policy arguments that get to that strategy of showing that there's a problem, there's a disparity, and you have to work your bill to make sure that enough members, you get enough votes, and enough members agree that there is a disparity or there's a problem. And how you do that is through moving your bill through the legislature, lots of negotiation, lots of discussions, through committee votes on the floor and in both houses of the legislature, and then on to the governor. And so a lot of this type of practical approach, in my view, is kind of where people come from when you're working in the legislature.
I think that's a really valid point. And, to turn to kind of some of the concrete skills that we work on in our courses, I tell students all the time, the most sort of wonderful pie in the sky policy solution is not meaningful if it can't actually be implemented and enacted. And so learning to deal with the real world limitations of the policymaking process and how do you compromise and negotiate. And as Jamie said, kind of pull the lens back and look beyond what's there to see what's possible, and then get people on board with that vision and have the ability to, take amendments to Jamie's earlier point and maybe reframe things to get something that is workable for all of the stakeholders involved. Those are very concrete skills that, you graduate from the program with knowledge in those areas. I think it's one thing to kind of read a textbook version of how a bill becomes a law or how an agency rulemaking process works, or, just sort of read about things that have been done. And it's another thing entirely to get concrete skills and experience in doing that, which I think is one of the strengths of our program.
We do have one question. Can an MSL student take part in the capital lawyering program, or is that reserved only for JD students?
So Kat can speak to the sort of online component of the MSL program, but as the director of the Capitol Center, we invite MSL students to our events in the Capitol Center. And then I have had students in my capital lawyering and policymaking course in the master's program. So MPA, MPP. So that is not limited to law students, but there are some courses that are limited to law students and some courses that are limited to MSL students. So that's kind of a more logistical question, but I'm happy to talk more about the kinds of courses that we have in capital lawyering, and we have a lot of parallels in the MSL program. For example, election law, the lawmaking course. I teach a course called Capital Lawyering and Policymaking. As I mentioned, I've had master's students in it, but we also have a course in the MSL program called Government Lawyering and Policymaking, or Government Law and Policymaking. So there are a lot of parallels there as well. I think one of the things that we want to do in the MSL program is ensure maximum flexibility and the ability to take classes asynchronously. The classes that are offered on campus are obviously not asynchronous, and they're in person. So I think there's room to navigate that, but Kat would be the authority on how to work through that process.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're in the government loan policy making concentration, you do have like required courses that you're going to have to take. But you can take classes in person if you're local and you want to. As Erin mentioned, like we do have parallels to a lot of those classes, but if you really want to be in person, or there's one in person that you want to take that we don't offer online, you're welcome to do that. We usually, and by we, I mean me, because I do the academic counseling, I just ask for a heads up. Because not all of our classes are offered every semester. So like we want to hit it just right. We want to check in with the professors, make sure they're okay with it. But normally it's, you can kind of do a little bit of everything. And even in the online programs, you get access to everything from the McGeorge campus, just as you would as an in-person student, and things like that. All right, any other questions? I haven't seen any others pop through, but take your time.
Can we put at least my contact information in the chat, and then if the
Yeah,
lists are open to it, maybe we put contact information. So I know sometimes when I'm watching these kinds of things afterwards, I think of a question and think, oh, I should have asked that. And it's nice to have the ability to reach out.
of course. I'm gonna put yours in real quick. There's Jamie's. Okay, so I have popped everybody's contact information in the chat. So if you guys do have questions later, feel free to send anybody an email. I guess I'll ask a question. I'm going to ask each of you just because I want to. What would you say was your favorite part of McGeorge? Whether it was a class, was it the community? Just one thing that was your favorite?
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a combination. The classes and the community and just the overall experience and at the end of it, the accomplishment, and that I really challenged myself to do something outside my comfort zone and achieved it. I think Jamie was saying this too. Like, it is hard, and it was working full time and doing this program was a big challenge. But I think that the general accomplishment. And then the community after, it's like you have this, you see people in the building and you have a bond of in McGeorge and going through the master's program together and so forth. So it is really a close-knit community. And just, the weight of the name that George carries, I think, and beyond the years that you're there is really special.
For me, I had taken a class with Rex Frazier, and it was basically understanding the lobbying world, the third house. And what I realized is I had a lot of blind spots as it related to the process, even though I had been in the Capitol, working in the Capitol for some time. And so what was exciting for me was I was in a classroom, though, in his class one day, and we were talking about the med fly, and Professor Fraser looked up and he realized most of the class probably didn't know what the med fly was, and because I was a returning student in maybe my early 40s at the time, you know, so which, you know, I hadn't been in school for a while, but I had been on this earth for enough time that I knew what the medfly was. And, you know, he asked, does anybody know what the medfly, after about 10 minutes of talking about the medfly was? I was the only person to raise my hand. And we had a nice laugh at that moment. And he said, get used to it. Happens to me every day now, Jamie. And so it's just, you know, I think wherever you're coming from, you're bringing something as far as experience, and you're adding to that with your superpowered credentials, and it becomes exciting. So you're in a space where, you know, as a returning student with whatever experience you have, you can't substitute that. And that plays out in the classroom, and you'll be challenged to, you know, declare what, you know, your perspective. I mean, I think that's what great brings, you know, that's when you kind of mold your legal training with your personality and your background and your experience, you know, that's when you become amplified and sort of ready to conquer more, right? Because you bring something uniquely special to the world, an advantage, a perspective, an experience, a background. And so you bringing that into the classroom and having the confidence to bring that into your, you know, your arguments or your perspectives is super important. And so that was a special day. I'll tell you the other piece was toward the end of my first semester, I was asked a question by my professor. And as you know, it's the Socratic method in a law school classroom oftentimes. And in the beginning, that was a bit of a challenge for me. But as the semester kind of wore on, I realized there was a day when I was asked a question and I was answering the question, and it was almost pre-consciousness. I was just going, and I had all of the answers to the question, and I really surprised myself that I was able to accomplish that in such a short amount of time in my first semester. But it was challenging at first, but you start to get it, and then you're on your way, and it's such a great feeling.
Okay.
My favorite memory of being at McGeorge is probably annoying Dean Schwartz. I he was such a wonderful dean, and we at the time the master students didn't have representation on the Student Bar Association. And so I got very much on my no taxation without representation horse, and worked really hard for a year to change the bylaws so that we would have somebody who could speak for us, because I think the master's program, you have a different experience. A lot of the people who are participating are working professionals who've maybe been, are further in their career, coming back for additional education, compared to right out of undergrad going straight into a full-time law program. So our needs and our voice was different than what was being advocated for in the student bar. So I thought that was really important. And for Dean, I would show up at McGeorge does a ton of events, and I would show up at every single event and get into photos with him and just be like, "Hey, remember what we're fighting for is representation." And that's one of my. And he was such a good sport about it, and his wife made really good cookies. So.
Well, and you will all be happy to know that C is there still. We do have a master student who represents the master students on the SBA. So we do have one more question. Are there many graduates who work in a more background level type of work? So they're talking about like more on analysis, not so much on interacting with people every day. I don't know.
Sure, I
Go
think
ahead.
you know, there are a lot of different things that one can do in this space with this degree. And a track, and Sarah can probably speak to this more, is the analyst track. So people who are interested in doing, and I think, Jamie, did you mention that you work for Senate Office of Research, or maybe I'm misremembering that? There also is.
I did work at the Senate desk, but
Okay.
interact a lot with people there. At the same time, it is an administrative role, and you're behind the scenes, and you're only seen when you make a mistake. So that, you know, it's not, you're not engaging with people throughout the day like that. Like
Yes, I think there are quite a few careers that people can do with this degree that are more research based, less public facing, more internal facing. Sarah, do you want to talk about the analyst classifications within state government? Because that seems like a prime example of that.
Yeah, and so my first role right out of the program was a finance budget analyst. So I was in the weeds on uh, budget analysis, policy analysis that was moving through the budget process. There are a variety of research and subject matter expert roles throughout the state. That if there is an area of interest to you, I was just on LinkedIn and I saw someone who went through the program with us who was a water policy was what she was really interested in. So she has dug really deep into that. One of my classmates was really into human resources and labor relations, and she does, I think she's like the director of labor relations at UC Davis now. So there are ways to, and this is, I didn't, much like Aaron, I didn't want to take all of the JD classes. I wasn't interested and they weren't going to get me where I wanted to be. But if you have an interest or if you need help identifying an interest in a policy area and then building the skills to dig really deep into that to get a career in it, this is a great way to do it through the different kind of pathways that McGeorge has created for the program, or if there's something that you have a big interest in. Like I took classes on the APA and now it's coming up in my current work and I love making regulations. So you can get really nerdy with it if you want.
I would say even in, government affairs and lobbying space, I've had several legislative associates that did not want to be in the public, the day-to-day lobbying. They just wanted to be behind the scenes, do the analysis for the clients, do the background materials, et cetera. And then, one of them has moved on and is now like an analyst for a state agency as well. There's also, in-house lobbying, so meaning like you're working for a business or for a trade association in-house, and which means you're basically dedicated to that one company or that one trade association, is often less public interfacing. You will more than likely have a contract lobbyist that will do all of that, work in the building, so you don't have to, but you become the expert on the policy and, an interface obviously with the business that you're working for. So you're kind of in the middle of that, but not doing so much on the external walking the halls of the Capitol, beating down the doors, but you're still very much involved in kind of the government affairs world, just not so much publicly.
I think another highlight of our program that I would add is because of our location and because of our alumni base and because of the expertise that so many people who are affiliated with McGeorge have, we have the ability to add courses and create new things that are responsive to hot issues at the time. For example, right now, I'm working with someone on creating a clean energy course because there's a lot of activity in that space. That's not something we've had previously. We've had cybersecurity courses, poverty law things. So, things that we are able to do that allow us to be responsive to what's going on in government right now. And we have, again, such a deep alumni bench of folks who are working in and around the Capitol that they can act as resources in those spaces. That's something that I think is very exciting because sometimes we think of education as static. There's a set of courses and that's what you do. And I think one of the things that we can do in our government laws and policy programs here is be responsive to new issues that have come up in new areas of expertise.
Can I come and audit some of those classes?
No, I always want to take them all.
I know.
Like I'm teaching too many. Now I need to take some more.
There was a couple that I didn't get to take that I wanted to, and now that clean energy and water, that would be great.
Yes, I think it'll be well subscribed for sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, I think we're gonna let everybody go. I want to thank you all for coming, especially our guest speakers. It's
Yeah.
always really great to hear from our alumni about what they're doing, because sometimes, you know, we've seen a transition a little bit too straight from undergrad into the MSL program. And so I think we also now have some students who just don't really know what they want to do or what they can do. So it's definitely helpful to hear from all of you about what you were doing and what you're doing now, you know, just to get some insight on how you got there and how the MSL helped you. So thank you all. And thank you, Professor O'Neill, for kind of moderating this and asking questions.
And of course, thank you for having us. And again, thank you to our alumni for being here. You all are, you make us so proud. I mean, you are the strength of our program, and you go out and do all of these things and then bring your willingness to share your experience back with our students and prospective students. So we are so grateful for that. So thank you for taking time out of your busy day. And to all of you who are joining us as students and prospective students, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Kat, for setting
Enjoy
it
it.
up.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Everybody have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.